I am beating every N64 game, and I mean all of them. The twist is, the next game I play is randomly selected, so I have no clue what's coming next. This is the journey to beating every N64 game. Game number 97, Racing Simulation Monaco Grand Prix. Released in 1998, this game was developed and published by Ubisoft. Well, Grand Prix makes me think this is a racing game. The question is, would it be an arcade racer or a realistic one? I've always been way more of a fan of arcade-style racers, but I do acknowledge there are a lot of people out there looking for something to emulate the real experience. Either way, hopefully this one won't be too bad because man, there are just so many racing games on this console. Let's get into it. The first thing I saw when I turned it on was a choice to use either arcade or simulation handling. Well, I think you already know which one I picked. I do think it's cool they tried to appeal to both types of players though. The main single player mode in this game is the championship mode, so I'll be doing that to beat this game. Next, it wanted me to pick my driver. There's a bunch of teams with 2 drivers on each. I think these are supposed to be clones of all the real racers in the F1 league at the time. The game doesn't have an official license, so they weren't allowed to use the drivers' names. I went with the Firenze team, which suspiciously sounds similar to Ferrari. Before every race, you can adjust the way your vehicle is configured. You can adjust the wing, suspension, tires, steering, brakes, body height, gearbox, and fuel tank. These adjust all your vehicle's different stats, and you can get kind of in-depth with it. One real interesting thing about F1 races is the cars are so lightweight that the amount of fuel you put in the tank heavily affects how well your car brakes and how fast it goes. It's kind of hard to wrap my brain around that. So the default difficulty was on Pro, which is kind of in the middle, like normal or medium in a typical game. The one thing that I did change is the race lane. If you aren't familiar with these races in real life, they can last well over an hour. I decided to set it to 10% of the real length, when 25% was the default. This just made things much less repetitive for me. The game follows the real F1 league, but again, it doesn't have the licenses to the tracks. So instead of listing the first races in Melbourne, it just says it's in Australia. The sound of the car's engine is wild. It reminds me of those electric drills they use at the dentist's office. It sounds like my own personal nightmare with like 20 different dentists just wailing on my teeth. The game is called Racing Simulation, and even on the arcade mode, it controls way more realistically than something like Mario Kart would. Typically, if you go off the road, you're going to spin out. I was struggling pretty hard to stay on the track, and I'm just not used to driving in a game like this. One thing I did after a few attempts was lower the amount of fuel in the car. I only needed to have slightly more than needed to finish the race, so by having the least amount possible, I'd have a bit better stats. I still didn't really mess with the other things for now. The game has a racing line to help you learn the track as well. It's essentially a path that if you follow it perfectly, you'd have the best outcome on the track. When the line gets darker, it means it's time to hit the brakes. Still though, both of these new things were not enough to succeed. I just kept losing, and I decided it was time to fully explore how to modify the car. The game's manual explains how each of the fields affects certain aspects of the car pretty well. A big thing I learned from this is the steering. This kind of angles your tires to not be perfectly straight when making contact with the road. The higher the angle, the better you can steer. However, it comes at a cost of wearing your tires down faster. Well, that's not a problem for me because, you know, we're doing short races. The pieces were coming together now, but it still wasn't all the way there. Now I was dealing with damage to my car, typically to the front end. When this happens, you may as well just give up because it's impossible to turn. One thing I still hadn't tried to do is qualify. Before the race, you do a qualifier to see where you'll start in the real race. I didn't really think it was that important, so I just skipped it. However, it's very important. What kept happening is after the start of the race, we would split into 2 groups, and I'd always be in the group in the back. I'd usually climb to the front of my group from using drafting to pass people, but after that, I got no boosts from drafting. Drafting is essentially like it just blocks the air resistance by using the car in front of you to, you get a slight speed boost from it because you're not dealing with the hitting the air. So it was essentially impossible to catch up without that. A trick I could do here is set my fuel to the minimum. You're supposed to run a bunch of qualifier laps and they'll take your best time. However, I just ran one lap with my fuel set to the absolute minimum. This gave me an advantage the other cars probably didn't have. It still took so many tries to do decent, but I did finally qualify in 7th place. Nearly 40 minutes to get this far. 7th place is good and all, but I needed some first places to take the title home. The last main thing I hadn't messed with was the gearbox. Now, I've played some racing games where it asks you to adjust this, but normally it just gives you a single number you change for like more acceleration focused or more speed focused setup. This game has you adjusting each individual gear with different values, and I don't know, I thought it was so confusing. I feel like having the earlier gears be lower values with the two highest gears being higher values is good, but I don't know, maybe not. Finally though, I was on a decent run. I had climbed to 2nd place, but the person in 1st was so far ahead of me. I thought I had no chance. When I hit the 4th lap, it just pushed me into 1st place randomly. I didn't even realize I was in 1st for a bit. Honestly, I'm still not sure what happened. I think the guy in 1st may have crashed and totaled the car, but I didn't really see it happen. Either way, I just had to clutch out the rest of the race. And come on, you guys already know how good I am under pressure, which is why I drove off the track on the final lap and fell into 2nd place at the very end. But you know what? I still got 2nd, which is good enough. The championship is scored on a points system, so I don't need to get 1st every time. I got 6 points for 2nd and 1st place got 10. As long as I have the most points at the end of the championship, I win. The 2nd race was in Brazil. This track was way different from the last one in that it had so many long straightaways. However, there was one section in the middle with some really sharp turns. So on something like this, you want to prioritize top speed over acceleration since you won't be slowing down as much. You just gotta be super careful in the curvy part. It felt so good to qualify in 1st place on this one, and on my 2nd attempt at it too. I was a bit worried that the AI would take the curvy section perfectly while I would struggle. That seemed to not be the case though, as I was so far ahead after this section. I guess I was doing better than I thought. Still, I managed to find a way to screw up despite having such a big lead, cause of course I'd do that. I took 2nd place once again, which I didn't think was too good. To my surprise though, when I checked the standings, I was in 1st by 2 points. This was really nice to see because I felt a lot more confident from this point. Race 3 was in Argentina. This track has 2 long straightaways with a lot of turns, so I went for a more balanced build. I didn't think I was doing too well during the qualifier, but the results said otherwise. Not too shabby. Real quick, I'll talk about the graphics and music. I honestly think these graphics are amazing for the N64. They went for a more realistic look, and I think given the hardware available, they did a great job. Sure, the background textures are weak, but I think the vehicles and the road look great. Plus the frame rate's smooth. The music on the other hand is lacking. There's pretty good music in the menus, but during a race you only get that ear-shattering engine sound. Although I guess that might be preferred in something like this going for realism. The commentary was kind of lacking too. Indie Racing 2000 gave us some awesome lines, and the guy in this rarely even talks to you. So anyway, I learned you could do tricks in this game. Here's me landing a sick 360 spin. Nah, just kidding, that was me hitting a turn too fast and spinning out. So yeah, I raced 7 laps in Argentina and took home 1st place for the first time. It doesn't really do anything special when you do, but at least you feel nice about it. I mean, yeah, that's about all there is to talk about with this one. It's just your standard old racing game. There were 16 in all and I had to do all of them. The 4th race was in San Marino. The mini-map for the track on this one kinda looked like a person's leg. I narrowly stole 1st place at the last second on this. Trying to pass this guy, I should probably just settle for 2nd. Get wrecked, nerd. The 5th race was on Spain. This one had a gigantic straightaway with tons of turns otherwise. There was also a bunch of cows on the side of the track. I crushed this one, beating 2nd by nearly 10 seconds. Now the 6th track, this one is known as Monaco. You know, from the title of the game. Man, I hate driving here. In fact, I hated it so much that I spun around and tried to attack all the other racers. Oh, Yep, okay, well. But seriously, I do dislike driving here. The roads are so thin, and there's so many big turns. If you need to pass somebody, it's way too hard because two cars can barely even fit side by side. I will admit, it's a unique track, what with it being right in the middle of the city and along the port. Still doesn't help how frustrating it is. I did end up getting first place here though. Race number 7 was in Canada. This one has a bunch of crazy turns on one side and a lot of straightaways on the other. I know, they're getting real creative with these. I took first place here with ease. Race 8 was in France. The big thing to note here is this track is freaking massive. Absolute unit. It's basically all straightaways too, so I was just zooming the entire time and it was pretty fun. I took second place. Race 9 was in the UK, or as the game calls it, Great Britain. This one is like a warped oval thingy that's been crumpled up or something like that. I got first place here once again. Race 10 is in Austria. The track here looked like an air horn or something. Guess what? I got first place. 11th race takes us to Germany, and something actually noteworthy happened here. When I was doing my qualifier, I drove off the road to skip an awkward turn. And I guess I received a penalty for this because my timer turned blank. I didn't really realize I was breaking any rules, man. I annihilated the competition on the actual race though and got first place. Race 12 was in Hungary where I easily got first. Race 13 was in Belgium. It says Belgium in giant letters on the finish line to make sure you know where you are. I got first here as well. Race 14 was in Italy. The track here looked like a big old sock. I actually only got 5th place here. The 15th race was in Luxembourg, another first place. And the final race was in Japan. Of course, I had to go out with a bang here. Literally. My engine blew up on the final lap for some reason, and I was out of commission. But because I was up so many points from previous races, it didn't even matter. It popped up with a screen saying I'm the world champion, and that's about all the acknowledgement you get for winning the championship. I decided to try out one race on simulation mode, and it honestly didn't feel all that different. Except for the part where everyone slowed down way more on a curve and I rammed into someone, losing my entire front end. I went into the pit where it took 13 seconds to fix up my car. The pit crew looked like they were wearing hazmat suits, or maybe they were aliens. But yeah, that's about all there is to this one. Game complete. So yeah, there you have it, my journey to beating Monaco Grand Prix. This game's alright, but it's just not something I'm personally into. I have learned from doing this challenge that there are a lot of fans of driving simulation games though. It kinda surprises me because none of my friends were into them at all growing up. If you are into that kind of thing, it might be worth checking this one out to see how it feels as a retro title. The graphics are really good and the frame rate's smooth other than when there's a bunch of cars piled up. I did think the commentary from the coach was lacking though. It'd be nice to have something to break up the constant whirring of the engine. I gave it a 4 out of 10 for enjoyability and a 3 out of 10 for difficulty. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Have a sneak peek at the next game. 293 games on the list. We gotten like the same number 3 times in a row. Mojo's hyped for the drawing. Alright Mojo, this is for you buddy. 3, 2, 1, go! Nice. Let's go, dude! Oh, shoot! Let's go! We are playing the next Elmo game, and Harley is not happy about it, which is Elmo's Letter Adventure. Heck yes. But yeah, if you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a like. It helps the channel a lot. And if you like this series, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one.